The transmission ended with a soft click, and Ambassador David Harper closed his eyes for 3 seconds. Just 3. That was all the time he allowed himself before standing and adjusting his jacket. Outside the observation window of the transport ship, stars blurred past in streams of light as they approached the Council station. Somewhere behind them, 47 bodies drifted in the wreckage of Research Station Galileo, frozen in the moment the Krillian missiles had torn through their habitat modules. His aide, a young woman named Patricia Wells, stood by the door with a data pad clutched against her chest. Her hands trembled slightly. This was her first major diplomatic mission, and it was about to become historic for all the wrong reasons. "Sir, the council chamber will be ready in 20 minutes. Chairwoman Elena sent another message asking if you'd reconsidered the mediation offer." Harper picked up his briefcase, the old-fashioned leather kind his grandfather had carried. Inside were documents that had already been transmitted electronically, but he believed in the weight of paper for moments like these. "Tell the chairwoman I appreciate her concern. My statement remains unchanged." The docking procedure took 15 minutes. Harper spent them reviewing faces in a folder. The 47 scientists, Dr. Rita Owens, who'd been 3 months from retirement, her assistant Marcus Young, who just learned his wife was pregnant, the Chen twins, brilliant xenobiologists who dedicated their lives to understanding alien ecosystems, each face memorized, each name a weight in his chest. The council chamber was exactly as the briefings had described, a circular room with seating arranged in concentric rings, each tier representing different levels of galactic authority. At the center, a speaking platform stood beneath a dome that showed the stars beyond. Representatives from 63 species filled the seats, their forms ranging from humanoid to utterly alien. Some breathed oxygen, others sat in specialized environment suits. All of them radiated the confidence of species who'd maintained peace for over 2,000 years. Harper walked to the center platform. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Chairwoman Elena spoke first. She was Torvashi, a species that resembled tall, elegant beings with silvered skin and 4 arms. Her voice carried the musical quality typical of her people. "Ambassador Harper, we convene this emergency session to address the tragedy at Research Station Galileo. The Council extends its deepest sympathies to humanity for this loss. We understand your anger. The Krillian Empire has been formally censured, and we are prepared to discuss substantial reparations and sanctions." The Krillian ambassador, a broad-shouldered being named Thorak, sat in the 3rd tier. His species looked vaguely reptilian, with scaled skin in deep green and eyes that could track movement across great distances. He hadn't stood or acknowledged Harper's entrance, a calculated insult. Harper set his briefcase on the platform and opened it. "Chairwoman Elena, honored council members, I thank you for your sympathy. However, I'm not here to discuss reparations or sanctions." A ripple of movement went through the chamber. Several translators buzzed as delegates leaned toward each other. "Ambassador, please reconsider," Elena continued. "War benefits no one. The Council has successfully mediated conflicts for millennia. Allow us to help find a peaceful resolution." Harper pulled out a single sheet of paper. His hands were steady. 72 hours ago, Earth sent a formal demand to the Krillian Empire. We requested the immediate surrender of the military officers responsible for ordering the attack on Station Galileo. We requested a full accounting of why a civilian research facility studying agricultural techniques was targeted. We requested compensation for the families of the murdered scientists. Thorak finally stood. His voice boomed across the chamber. "Murdered? It was a military error. The station's transponder codes were irregular. Our forces acted on threat assessment protocols. These things happen in space. Humanity should accept the risks of operating in contested regions." "Contested regions," Harper repeated softly. Station Galileo was in human-controlled space, 50 light-years from the nearest Krillian border. It took your ships 3 days to reach it. That's not an error, Ambassador Thorak. That's a deliberate act. The chamber erupted in crosstalk. Multiple delegates spoke at once, their translators creating a cacophony of sound. Elena raised two of her four arms, calling for order. Regardless of the circumstances, war is not the answer, a delegate from the Brevali contingent called out. The Brevali resembled aquatic mammals and spoke through vocalizers from their environmental tanks. Humanity is barely a century into space travel. The Krillian Empire spans 40 systems. This is suicide. Harper looked directly at the Brevali delegate. Perhaps, but it's our choice to make. He lifted the paper. This is a formal declaration. As of 3 hours ago, the deadline we gave the Krillian Empire expired without response. At that moment, humanity entered a state of war with the Krillian Empire. I'm here as a courtesy to inform this council of our actions. Earth's Third Fleet engaged Krillian forces at the Deneb border stations 40 minutes ago. Our Fifth Fleet is currently en route to the Arcturus supply depot. The Ninth Fleet has begun escort operations for all civilian vessels in human space. Silence, complete and total silence. Thorak's laugh broke it, deep and mocking. You're insane. Your entire species is insane. We have 600 warships. You have perhaps 80 vessels that could charitably be called military grade. This war will last a month, and humanity will cease to exist as a spacefaring civilization. Harper carefully placed the paper back in his briefcase and closed it. You might be right, Ambassador Thorak. We might lose. We might lose badly, but we will fight. We offered peace. We offered justice. We offered compromise. You offered contempt, so now we offer war. He turned to face Elena. Chairwoman, humanity requests that the Council maintain neutral shipping lanes for humanitarian purposes. We will respect Council neutrality and expect the same in return. Any species that provides military aid to the Krillian Empire will be considered hostile. Any species that offers medical or civilian aid to either side will be respected. Elena's silver skin had paled to almost white. Ambassador Harper, please, thousands will die, perhaps millions, over what? Pride. David Harper picked up his briefcase and looked at the 47 faces in his memory. Not pride, Chairwoman, principle. We tried your way, now we try ours. He walked toward the exit. Behind him, chaos erupted in the council chamber. The council chamber had never experienced anything quite like this in its 2,000-year history. Chairwoman Elena struck the resonance chime 3 times before order began to return. Her 4 arms moved in the traditional Torvashi gestures of calm, but her silver skin remained pale with distress. Ambassador Thorak was on his feet, his scales flushed dark with anger. This is an outrage. The Council must condemn this action immediately. Humanity is barely more than a primitive species playing with technology they don't understand. They cannot be allowed to destabilize galactic peace because of an unfortunate accident. A Merlian delegate, whose species resembled crystalline formations that communicated through light pulses, flashed a response that the translators rendered as measured skepticism. The human ambassador made specific accusations. Were the transponder codes actually irregular? Was Station Galileo transmitting proper identification? Thorak waved a clawed hand dismissively. Military intelligence indicated potential weapons research. We acted accordingly. On what evidence? The question came from Council Member Dren, one of the longest-serving members. His species, the Kavari, were small furry beings with oversized eyes that saw into spectrums humans couldn't perceive. His advanced age gave him authority few would challenge. I reviewed the incident report your government submitted. It mentioned suspected weapons research but provided no supporting data. The evidence is classified, Thorak replied. How convenient, Dren said dryly. So we're to accept that humanity's first major research station beyond their core systems, dedicated to agricultural development for colony worlds, was actually a weapons facility. based on classified evidence. Evidence so classified that apparently your own government couldn't be bothered to share it with the research team you murdered. The word murdered hung in the air like a challenge. Thorax translator emitted a growl. Council member Dren, I will not tolerate. The chamber's alert system interrupted him. A priority communication from the council's military intelligence division. Elena accepted it, and her expression shifted from distress to alarm as she read. The human ambassador was not exaggerating, she announced. We're receiving confirmed reports of human military action at 3 separate locations. Deneb border stations 4 and 7 have gone silent. Long-range sensors detected multiple human warships in those sectors. The Arcturus supply depot is reporting incoming vessels. And there's more. She paused, scrolling through additional data. Human governments have issued a joint statement. All civilian space traffic is suspended. Commercial shipyards have been nationalized. They're calling it Total Mobilization Protocol. A Zephani delegate, whose gaseous form shimmered in its containment field, pulsed with concern. Total mobilization. That's a term from their planetary wars. It means converting their entire economy to military production. Surely they can't sustain that, another delegate argued. The economic cost would be catastrophic. Council member Dren pulled up holographic displays of human history. Images flickered above the chamber floor. Cities in ruins, armies numbering in millions, weapons of terrible power. This species, he said quietly, has fought wars where they deployed tens of millions of soldiers, wars where single battles lasted months and casualties exceeded what most galactic conflicts produce in years. They've used atomic weapons on themselves, twice, and they rebuilt. I suggest we not assume they can't sustain what they've done countless times before. Elena composed herself. We must attempt mediation. I propose sending a delegation to Earth immediately. We can offer. With respect, Chairwoman, offer them what? Dren interrupted. The humans demanded justice. Specific, clear justice. The Krillian Empire responded with silence. Now the humans are responding with action. What exactly do we offer that addresses their core grievance? Thorax slammed a fist against his seat rest. This is absurd. We will crush them. 1 month. I give them 1 month before they're begging for terms. A new voice entered the debate. Ambassador Yenna of the Saleth Confederation, a species known for their analytical approach to conflict. Her form resembled an upright insect, with multiple limbs and compound eyes that could process information at remarkable speeds. I've been running simulations, she said, based on observed human behavior and their historical conflicts. The results are disturbing. He activated a holographic projection. It showed fleet movements, casualty projections, economic impacts. If humans fight according to standard galactic protocols, the Krillian Empire wins decisively within 6 weeks. However, humans don't follow standard protocols. They adapt. They improvise. They accept casualty rates that would cause most species to surrender immediately. When I adjust the simulations for human historical behavior patterns, the outcome changes dramatically. The projection shifted, showing branching probability trees. In 17% of scenarios, humanity achieves strategic victories through unconventional tactics. In 43%, the conflict extends beyond a year and both sides sustain massive casualties. In 28%, the Krillian Empire is forced to negotiate from a weakened position. In only 12% do we see the quick Krillian victory Ambassador Thorak predicts. Silence followed her presentation. That's impossible, Thorak said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Is it? Dren brought up another display. I've been studying human military history since they joined the Council. This species practices something they call total war. When engaged, they don't just fight battles. They target supply lines, production facilities, logistics networks. They make war economically unsustainable for their enemies, and they're willing to absorb terrible losses to achieve victory. Elena's 4 arms moved in a gesture of frustration. Then we must stop this before it escalates further. Council Member Dren, Ambassador Yena, you will lead a delegation to Earth. Ambassador Thorak, your government must be prepared to negotiate seriously. I will not have this council's legacy be that we allowed two species to destroy each other over pride. Not pride, a quiet voice said. Everyone turned to see a human observer in the back gallery. She wore the uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Ambassador Harper asked me to clarify something if this topic arose. Humanity isn't fighting over pride. We're fighting because 47 people who dedicated their lives to helping others were killed, and the killers faced no consequences. We're fighting because if we don't, it tells the galaxy that human lives don't matter. That you can murder our people, and the Council will offer strongly worded letters and economic sanctions. We'd rather die fighting than live as targets. She left without waiting for a response. The council chamber erupted in debate once more, but Elena noticed something that troubled her deeply. Several delegates were looking at humanity's actions not with horror, but with a calculating interest. If humanity succeeded, it would fundamentally change how younger species approached galactic politics. The age of peaceful mediation might be ending, and they had about 72 hours to stop it. The destroyer Valiant hung in space 3 light towers from Deneb Station 7, its hull scarred from the engagement 14 hours prior. Inside the medical bay, Commander Sarah Mitchell watched her chief medical officer work on a wounded crewman. The young man's name was Tommy Park, and he'd been in engineering when the Krillian counterattack had breached the aft section. Burns covered his left side, but he'd live. "Commander, the Admiral wants you on priority channel," her communications officer announced over the intercom. Sarah left sickbay and headed to her ready room. The Valiant was one of humanity's newer ships, built in the frantic expansion after first contact with galactic civilization. It had been designed for exploration. Now it was painted in reactive camouflage and carried enough missiles to crack a small moon. Admiral Richard Stone appeared on her screen. He looked tired. Everyone looked tired. "Sarah, good work at Deneb 7. You kept them busy while the Marines took the station." "We lost the Endeavor, sir. Captain Rodriguez and all hands." Stone's expression hardened. "I know, I've written the letters, but we've got bigger problems. The Krillians are adapting faster than we expected. They're bringing in reinforcements from the Kepler sector. 3 cruisers, maybe more. We need to hit them before they can establish a defensive perimeter." "Sir, we've been in continuous combat operations for 2 days. The crew needs rest. We need repairs. Valiant took damage to the reactor shielding." "I know what I'm asking, Commander, but this is how we win. The Krillians fight wars the same way they've fought them for 500 years. Establish positions, consolidate forces, engage in calculated battles with minimal casualties. We're not giving them time to do that. We keep them off balance. We make them react instead of act." Sarah pulled up tactical displays. The Kepler sector. It would take them 18 hours to reach it, and that was pushing their damaged reactor beyond recommended limits. "What's the strategic objective, sir?" "The Krillians have a supply station there. Nothing major, but it coordinates logistics for their inner colonies. We take it out, their reinforcement schedule gets pushed back 3 weeks. 3 weeks where we fortify our own positions and bring more ships online. Earth's shipyards are running triple shifts. Every day we buy them is a day we get stronger." "And the cost, sir?" Stone met her eyes. "Everything we can afford to pay. You have your orders, Commander." Stone out. The screen went dark. Sarah sat in her chair and allowed herself 10 seconds of doubt. Just 10. Then she stood and headed to the bridge. 70,000 light-years away, in the Council Station's observation center, Ambassador Yena watched feeds from the conflict zones. She'd been monitoring human military communications where they weren't encrypted, studying their tactics and strategies. What she saw fascinated and horrified her in equal measure. Council member Dren entered the observation center. moving with the careful steps of someone who'd lived through multiple galactic ages. "What have you learned?" he asked. "They're magnificent and terrible," Yenna replied. She pulled up a recording of the Deneb 7 engagement. "Watch this. The human destroyer engages 2 Krillian frigates. By all tactical logic, the destroyer should retreat. It's outgunned. Instead, it advances and draws fire while a smaller force of human marines approaches the station from a different vector. The destroyer takes heavy damage but survives. The station falls. The humans trade efficiency for unpredictability." "Casualties?" Dren asked. "1 human ship destroyed, 97 crew lost, but they captured a strategic position that gives them control over this entire region." She zoomed out to show the larger picture. "The Krillians are responding exactly as predicted. They're pulling forces from secondary positions to reinforce primary targets. This creates gaps the humans exploit." Dren studied the displays. The Krillian military doctrine is based on overwhelming force at decisive points. It's worked for them for centuries. "Against opponents who also follow established military doctrine," Yenna said. "Humans appear to have studied every major conflict in galactic history and identified the patterns everyone follows. Then they do something different." A new alert appeared on the screens. A report from a Council observer team that had reached the Sterling colony world, where Krillian ground forces had landed 3 days prior. Yenna opened the file and began reading. Her compound eyes processed the information rapidly, and her body language shifted to something Dren recognized as profound concern. "What is it?" he asked. "The ground war," she said quietly. "The observer team is requesting immediate extraction. They're calling it a humanitarian crisis, but not in the way we expected." She brought up video footage. It showed a human city under siege. Krillian forces, equipped with advanced armor and weapons, had expected quick capitulation. Instead, they'd encountered resistance from the civilian population. Not organized military resistance, something messier and more desperate. Ambushes using improvised explosives. Snipers firing from residential buildings. Supply convoys attacked by farmers using modified agricultural equipment. The Krillian commander had responded with force, but every civilian casualty seemed to generate more resistance. The footage showed Krillian soldiers, trained for clean warfare between professional militaries, increasingly frustrated and frightened by an enemy that didn't wear uniforms and didn't follow any rules they understood. "This is what humans call guerrilla warfare," Yenna explained. "They have extensive historical experience with it, both conducting it and fighting against it. Usually, it ends badly for everyone involved." Dren watched as human civilians carried wounded comrades through rubble while under fire. They don't surrender. Even their non-military population doesn't surrender. "It's worse than that," Yenna said. "Look at this section." The footage shifted to a field hospital. Human medics were treating wounded, both human and Krillian. A Krillian soldier, injured in a firefight, received the same care as a human defender. One of the medics was crying as she worked, but her hands remained steady. "They'll kill Krillian soldiers without hesitation," Yenna said. "Then they'll save Krillian wounded with equal determination. I don't understand it." "I think I do," Dren said softly. "They separate the war from the individual. They'll fight to the death against someone, then offer that same person medical care if they're injured. It's not logical. It's moral. They have rules they follow even when those rules are disadvantageous." Another alert. This one from Earth's industrial sectors. Yenna pulled up the economic data, and her translators emitted something close to disbelief. "They've converted 40% of civilian manufacturing to military production in 3 days. They're building ships, weapons, and equipment at rates that should be economically impossible. The projected cost will devastate their economy for decades." "And they're doing it anyway," Dren observed. "Yes, the Council delegation to Earth reports that human leaders are using the phrase, whatever it takes in all official communications. Not whatever is reasonable or whatever is sustainable. Whatever it takes. Dren turned away from the displays. We need to end this war immediately. Not because humans will lose, because I'm no longer certain they will. And if they win, it changes everything about galactic civilization. The age of calculated, limited conflicts ends. We'll have established a precedent that total commitment trumps superior technology and numbers. The Krillians still have significant advantages, Yenna pointed out. For now, but wars aren't won in days. They're won in months or years, and I've studied enough history to know that the side willing to sacrifice more usually prevails, especially if they're clever about how they fight. He paused. Schedule an emergency council session. We need to force negotiations before this escalates beyond control. As they left the observation center, neither noticed the small detail in one of the frozen video frames. A human soldier, exhausted and injured, sharing water with a Krillian prisoner, both looking equally miserable, both equally human in their suffering. The emergency council session began with a holographic testimony. Dr. Saren Valk, a Melnari observer who'd been granted access to the Sterling colony world, materialized above the central platform. His species resembled tall, willowy beings with pale blue skin and enormous eyes adapted for low-light environments. His voice carried the stress of someone who'd witnessed something beyond their experience. Honorable Council members, I must begin with a formal protest. The conditions on Sterling violate multiple conventions regarding civilian protection during conflict. However, the violations are being committed by both sides, often simultaneously, in ways that defy traditional categorization. Chairwoman Elena leaned forward. Explain, Dr. Valk. The hologram shifted to show footage from Sterling's capital city. Buildings showed damage from Krillian orbital bombardment, but the streets were active with human civilians moving supplies, treating wounded, and maintaining defensive positions. The Krillian ground forces expected standard occupation protocols. Identify military targets, neutralize them, establish control. Instead, they found a population that refuses to acknowledge the concept of occupation. Humans don't have a warrior caste. Every civilian is potentially a combatant. A school teacher in the morning becomes a resistance fighter in the evening, then returns to treating wounded children the next morning. Ambassador Thorax stood. This proves they're savages. They hide military operations among civilians, making them legitimate targets. That's not accurate, Dr. Valk replied. They're not hiding military operations. They're not maintaining a separation between military and civilian. Every human adult considers themselves responsible for defense. Krillian forces are facing an entire population in a state of total war. The hologram changed again. This time it showed a Krillian checkpoint. Human civilians moved through it, submitting to searches and inspections. But the Krillian soldiers looked nervous, scanning constantly for threats. The body language spoke volumes about who actually controlled the situation. The Krillian battalion commander requested I observe a specific incident, Dr. Valk continued. 3 days ago, his forces were ambushed using explosives hidden in agricultural containers. 12 soldiers killed. They tracked the attack to a farming community outside the city. When they arrived to investigate, they found the community operating a field hospital, treating both human and Krillian wounded from various engagements. The same people who attacked them were treating their wounded, Council Member Dren asked. Possibly, probably. The humans refuse to explain. They say everyone in the community contributes to both resistance and medical care. The Krillian commander was about to arrest everyone when his own wounded soldiers intervened. They insisted the medical staff had saved their lives and followed proper medical protocols. The commander withdrew without making arrests. Silence filled the chamber as the implications sank in. The Krillians don't know how to fight this kind of war, Dr. Valk said. Their doctrine assumes clear distinctions between combatants and non-combatants. Humans blur those lines completely, then establish different moral lines that their enemy doesn't understand. They'll kill you in combat without mercy, then risk their lives to save you afterward if you're wounded. The Krillian soldiers are experiencing severe psychological stress. They're trained for clean warfare. This is anything but clean. Ambassador Yenna activated her own display. The pattern extends to space combat. We've analyzed 73 engagements over the past month. Human forces consistently achieve tactical objectives while suffering higher casualties. But they're not making suicide runs. They're calculating acceptable losses versus strategic gains. When they lose a ship, they ensure it damages the enemy or accomplishes a mission objective. Nothing is wasted. She pulled up data on human ship production. Earth and its colonies are now producing one warship every 4 days. They're not quality vessels by galactic standards, but they're adequate, and they're improving with each iteration. Human engineers are adapting galactic technology in ways we didn't anticipate. They're combining it with their own historical weapon concepts. Such as, another delegate asked, kinetic weapons operating at relativistic speeds, chemical explosives with yields comparable to small fusion warheads, directed electromagnetic pulses that disable electronics, close-quarters combat protocols for ship-to-ship boarding actions, something that hasn't been practiced in galactic warfare for over a millennium. The Krillians train for energy weapon exchanges at medium to long range. Humans close distance and use weapons that their enemies' shields aren't optimized to stop. Thorax scales had darkened to almost black. We've captured several human vessels. We've interrogated prisoners. They reveal nothing of value. They recite name, rank, and serial identification, then refuse further communication. Some have died under interrogation rather than provide intelligence. You're torturing prisoners. Dren's voice cut like ice through the chamber. Enhanced interrogation within acceptable parameters, Thorak corrected. We need intelligence on their military capabilities and strategic planning. The hologram of Dr. Valk flickered with distress. Ambassador Thorak, I must inform you that reports of prisoner mistreatment have reached human command. Their response was to issue new orders to their forces. All Krillian prisoners are to be treated in accordance with something they call the Geneva Conventions, a set of rules from their own planetary wars governing prisoner treatment. They're applying higher standards to your soldiers than you're applying to theirs. Weakness, Thorak declared. No, Dren said quietly. Strategy. They're demonstrating moral superiority while simultaneously proving they can win militarily. Every Krillian soldier who survives human captivity and receives proper medical care becomes evidence that humans fight with honor even when their enemy doesn't. A new voice entered the debate, a delegate from the Praxis Unity, a species that rarely involved themselves in galactic politics. They resembled energy beings contained in crystalline matrices, and their translated voice carried harmonic overtones. We have monitored this conflict with interest. Humanity demonstrates a concept their philosophers call just war theory. They believe warfare can have moral dimensions. They fight fiercely but within self-imposed ethical constraints. This makes them more dangerous, not less. How does that make them more dangerous? Thorak demanded. Because, the Praxis delegate replied, they can sustain warfare indefinitely without losing their moral center. Most species either fight without restraint and destroy themselves morally, or fight with too much restraint and lose militarily. Humans have found a balance. They're willing to die in large numbers for their principles, but they maintain those principles even while dying. This gives them a psychological advantage. Their soldiers know they're fighting for something meaningful. Do yours. The question hung in the chamber like an accusation. Chairwoman Elena stood, all 4 arms extended in the Torvashi gesture of authority. Enough. We cannot allow this to continue. Ambassador Thorak, I am formally requesting that the Krillian Empire agree to mediated negotiations. The Council will guarantee human territorial integrity, and provide reparations for Station Galileo. In exchange, humanity must cease military operations and return to diplomatic channels. Before Thorak could respond, the chamber's communication system activated. Ambassador David Harper's face appeared on the main display. He looked tired. Everyone involved in this war looked tired now. Chairwoman Elena, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you should know that human forces have captured the Arcturus supply depot. We're also conducting operations in the Centauri sector. The Krillian Empire has lost 14 strategic positions in 38 days. We will continue operations until the Krillian government surrenders the officers responsible for the Station Galileo attack and agrees to council-supervised military restrictions. Ambassador Harper, your people are dying, Elena said. Thousands already, this must stop. Harper's expression didn't change. Yes, they're dying. They know it. They accepted it. Every volunteer in our military understood the odds when they signed up. But they also understood that if we don't establish that human lives have value, that our people deserve justice, then we're just targets. Easy prey for any species that wants to test humanity's resolve. We'd rather pay this price now than condemn future generations to paying it forever. He paused. I've seen the casualty reports, Chairwoman. I've written letters to families. I've attended memorial services over video link while standing on ships still covered in blast scoring. I know the cost, but we're not stopping, not until justice is served. The transmission ended. The council chamber erupted in debate once more, but several delegates were looking at the Krillian contingent with new expressions. Not anger, not sympathy. Calculation. The command center on Earth's orbital defense platform buzzed with controlled chaos. Admiral Richard Stone stood before a holographic tactical display showing the entire conflict region. Red indicators marked Krillian positions. Blue showed human forces. The color distribution should have been terrifying. Red dominated the map, but the blue indicators were moving, shifting, appearing in unexpected locations, while red indicators blinked out one by one. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the council station, his communications officer announced. They're requesting immediate cessation of hostilities for diplomatic negotiations. Tell them we'll consider negotiations after the Krillian Empire meets our stated demands, Stone replied without looking away from the display. How's Operation Cascade progressing? A young tactical officer, Lieutenant Peters, highlighted a section of space near the Krillian logistics hub at Vega Prime. 4th and 8th fleets are in position. The Krillians have reinforced the hub with 3 heavy cruisers, but our reconnaissance indicates they're rotating crew for rest cycles. If we hit them in the next 6 hours, we catch 2 of the cruisers with minimal combat readiness. Casualties projection. Hi, sir. We're looking at losing perhaps 8 to 12 ships out of a 40-ship strike force. But if we succeed, we cut the Krillian supply line for their entire forward deployment. They'll have to pull back from 7 occupied systems to consolidate. Stone studied the numbers, 8 to 12 ships, roughly 600 to 900 crew members, each with a name, each with a family. He'd written too many letters already. The stack on his desk kept growing. Execute Operation Cascade, and get me General Martinez on the ground situation. The holographic display shifted to show Sterling's world. General Linda Martinez appeared, her uniform dirty and her face showing the strain of managing a ground war across an entire planet. Behind her, the sounds of distant weapons fire created a harsh background rhythm. General status report. We're holding barely. The Krillian ground forces have superior equipment, but they're not trained for this kind of combat. They keep trying to establish traditional battle lines. We keep refusing to let them. Civilian resistance is tying down 3 of their battalions in urban areas. Our regular forces are conducting hit-and-run operations against their supply columns. They're getting frustrated. Frustrated enemies make mistakes, Stone observed. They also get desperate, sir. I'm worried they're going to escalate, maybe orbital bombardment of civilian centers. They've threatened it twice already. If they do, we respond in kind against Krillian civilian targets. They know that. It's the only thing keeping them from total war. Stone paused. How are our people holding up? Martinez looked off camera for a moment. They're tired, they're scared, but they're not breaking. Every civilian who picks up a weapon knows what they're risking. We've had entire families volunteer for resistance operations. I've got grandmothers running intelligence networks and teenagers building improvised explosives. It's beautiful and horrible at the same time. On the council station, Ambassador Yenna compiled her latest report. The data was damning for the Krillian Empire. She'd spent 6 weeks analyzing every aspect of the conflict, and the conclusion was becoming unavoidable. Humanity was winning. Not through superior technology or numbers, through sheer bloody-minded determination combined with strategic flexibility that the Krillians couldn't counter. Every time the Krillian military adapted to human tactics, humans changed their approach. Every time the Krillians reinforced a position, humans struck somewhere unexpected. Council member Dren entered her workspace. The delegation to Earth has returned. You should hear their report. The delegation leader, a Torvashi diplomat named Kellen, looked shaken. He'd spent 10 days on Earth meeting with human leaders, touring military production facilities, and attempting to convince humanity to negotiate. They're absolutely serious, Kellen reported to the assembled council members. I met with the Secretary General of Earth's unified government. She showed me production figures. They're building 40 ships a month now. By the end of the year, they project 100 ships monthly. Their entire civilization has reorganized around war production. That's economically unsustainable, a delegate objected. They don't care. I spoke with factory workers, engineers, civilian administrators. Everyone I met accepted that their economy will require decades to recover. They consider it an acceptable price for establishing that humanity won't be victimized without consequences. Kellen pulled up images from his visit. I toured a ship construction facility. They've combined galactic technology with their own innovations. The ships aren't beautiful. They're functional, tough, and produced quickly. The human engineer guiding me said something I found chilling. She said these ships were designed with the assumption that most would be destroyed in combat, so they focused on making them easy to build rather than hard to kill. Disposable warships, Dren murmured. They're treating ships the way most species treat ammunition. There's more, Kellen continued. I requested permission to visit military training facilities. They refused most of my requests, but they did allow me to attend a memorial service for a ship called the Endeavor that was lost early in the conflict. There were families present, children who'd lost parents, spouses grieving lost partners, and every single person I spoke with said the same thing. They were proud that their loved ones had died defending humanity's dignity. He paused, struggling with the memory. One woman, she'd lost her husband. She had a young daughter, maybe 6 years old. The child asked why her father had to die, and the mother said, so that you can live in a galaxy that respects human life. Then she thanked me for attending, thanked me, while grieving her husband. Silence filled the council chamber. The Krillian Empire must negotiate, Chairwoman Elena stated. Ambassador Thorak, your government must see that this war is becoming unsustainable. Thorak had been quiet throughout the presentation. His scales had lost their dark anger color, fading to a mottled gray that suggested uncertainty. The Krillian High Command believes we can still achieve military victory. Our production capacity exceeds humanity's. Our technology remains superior. If we commit additional fleets, then humanity commits more resources, Dren interrupted. I've run the projections, Ambassador. This war has 3 possible outcomes. First, the Krillian Empire achieves total victory by destroying humanity's ability to wage war. This would require actions so extreme that the Council would be forced to intervene militarily against you. Second, the war continues for years, bleeding both sides until your empire's economy collapses under the strain. Third, you negotiate now from a position of relative strength before humans become stronger. We cannot appear weak, Thorak protested. You'll appear wise, Yenna said. The species that recognizes when to end a conflict demonstrates strategic thinking. The species that fights until mutual destruction demonstrates nothing but stubbornness. A priority alert interrupted the debate. All displays shifted to show a new development. The human 4th and 8th fleets had engaged Krillian forces at Vega Prime. The battle was ongoing, but initial reports showed the supply hub severely damaged. 3 Krillian heavy cruisers had been disabled or destroyed. Human casualties were high, 11 ships lost, but the strategic objective was achieved. The Krillian supply line was broken. Thorak stared at the tactical display. His entire posture conveyed defeat. I need to consult with my government. Do so quickly, Elena advised, because humanity is not slowing down, and every day this continues, their position grows stronger while yours grows weaker. As the council session adjourned, Dren remained at his station studying the conflict data. He'd lived through the formation of the Galactic Council. He'd witnessed the establishment of the peaceful order that had governed for millennia. He'd believed that era of calculated, limited conflicts represented an evolutionary advancement for spacefaring civilizations. Now he wondered if humanity was teaching them all a lesson they should have never forgotten. Sometimes the species willing to sacrifice everything wins, not because they're stronger, but because they're more committed to their principles than to their survival. The holographic display flickered, showing new human fleet movements. Blue indicators spreading across the map like a tide that refused to stop rising. 3 weeks after the Vega Prime engagement, the Krillian Empire requested formal peace negotiations. The announcement sent ripples through galactic civilization. The Council scheduled a historic session where terms would be discussed and finalized. Species from across known space sent representatives, all wanting to witness how humanity would handle victory. Ambassador David Harper arrived at the Council station without fanfare. He carried the same worn leather briefcase his grandfather had used. Inside were updated casualty reports. The number had grown from 47 scientists to over 4,000 military personnel and 1,800 civilians. Each name was still memorized. Each loss still felt. The council chamber was packed. Representatives filled every tier, and observation galleries overflowed with diplomats and analysts who wanted to witness this moment. The age of calculated galactic warfare was ending. Whatever humanity did next would define the new age. Chairwoman Elena called the session to order. Her silver skin had returned to its normal color, though stress still showed in her movements. We convene this historic session to formalize the end of hostilities between humanity and the Krillian Empire. Ambassador Thorak has submitted a request for negotiated settlement. Ambassador Harper, humanity has achieved significant military victories. The Council asks what terms you require for peace. Harper stood and walked to the central platform. He set his briefcase down and opened it, pulling out a single document, not a data pad, physical paper. The symbolism was clear to everyone watching. The terms are simple, Harper began. First, the Krillian military officers who ordered the attack on Research Station Galileo will be surrendered to a joint council human tribunal for trial. The evidence will be presented publicly. Justice will be transparent. Murmurs ran through the chamber. This was standard, expected. Second, the Krillian Empire will pay reparations, not to Earth's government, but to a memorial fund established in the names of the 47 scientists murdered at Station Galileo. This fund will provide research grants for young scientists across all species, prioritizing projects focused on peaceful cooperation and development. The murmurs grew louder. This was unexpected. Reparations typically went to governments, not memorial funds. Third, the Krillian Empire will reduce its military by 40% under Council supervision. The reduction will occur over 5 years, with inspections every 6 months. The purpose is not to weaken the Krillian people, but to ensure their government thinks carefully before initiating aggression against any species. Thorax stood. His scales had settled into a neutral gray-green. He looked older somehow, as if the war had aged him beyond his years. These terms are acceptable, but I must ask, Ambassador Harper, your forces could continue. You could occupy Krillian worlds. You could demand far more. Why stop here? Harper looked at the Krillian ambassador for a long moment. Because justice isn't about revenge, Ambassador Thorak. We wanted you to answer for your actions. We wanted to establish that human lives have value and that actions have consequences. We've achieved that. Taking more would just create new grievances, new cycles of violence. He picked up his briefcase and pulled out additional documents. But there's a fourth provision, one I suspect will be more controversial. The chamber fell silent. Humanity offers technological and medical assistance to rebuild Krillian worlds damaged during the conflict. We've allocated resources for hospital construction, agricultural infrastructure, and civilian ship repair. We're also offering educational exchanges. Young Krillians can study at human universities, and young humans will study at Krillian institutions. We'd like to ensure the next generation knows each other as colleagues, not enemies. Absolute silence. Several delegates' translation devices seemed to malfunction from sheer disbelief. Thorak's voice cracked. You would help us. After everything, we killed your people, we refused your justice, we fought to destroy you, and you offer aid. Yes, Harper said simply, because we fought a government's policies, not an entire species. The Krillian farmers whose crops were destroyed by orbital bombardment didn't order the attack on Station Galileo. The Krillian civilians whose homes were damaged in our strikes didn't make the decision to ignore our demands for justice. They're victims of this war too. We have no quarrel with them. He turned to face the entire council. Humanity learned something important over thousands of years of fighting ourselves. War isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about achieving objectives that support peace. We've achieved our objectives. The officers responsible will face justice. The Krillian government will be supervised to prevent future aggression. And now we want to build something better than what existed before. We want a galaxy where attacking civilian research stations is universally condemned, where justice is transparent, and where former enemies can become partners. Council member Dren stood, his aged form moving with surprising energy. I have been a council member for longer than most species in this chamber have achieved space travel. I have mediated conflicts, negotiated treaties, and watched civilizations rise and fall. This is the most extraordinary peace proposal I have ever witnessed. He turned to the assembled delegates. Humanity has demonstrated something we thought was contradictory. They fought with absolute commitment and devastating effectiveness. They were willing to sacrifice everything for their principles, and now they're offering compassion to their defeated enemy. This is not weakness. This is what moral strength looks like. Ambassador Yenna activated her displays. I have completed my analysis of the conflict. Humanity won not just through superior strategy or willingness to accept casualties. They won because they understood something fundamental about warfare that we'd forgotten. Wars end. What you do after the war matters as much as what you do during it. They planned for peace while fighting for victory. The vote was called. The terms were accepted unanimously. The Krillian Empire agreed to all provisions, including the unexpected offer of humanitarian aid. As delegates began to disperse, Thorak approached Harper on the central platform. Why? The Krillian ambassador asked quietly. I need to understand. We killed your people. We would have destroyed your entire civilization if we'd won. Why show us mercy now? Harper closed his briefcase. Because somebody has to break the cycle, Ambassador. If we demanded total destruction of your military, occupation of your worlds, and punitive measures against your population, what would have happened in 50 years? 100. Your grandchildren would grow up hating humans. They'd prepare for revenge. We'd have to maintain massive military forces to contain you. And eventually there'd be another war. And another. And another. He picked up his briefcase. We'd rather have your grandchildren study at our universities and marry our grandchildren than plan revenge against them. We'd rather your scientists collaborate with ours than develop weapons to use against us. The 47 people who died at Station Galileo were scientists. They dedicated their lives to building things, discovering things, helping people. The best way to honor them isn't to create more death. It's to create more life, more cooperation, more understanding. Thorax scales shifted to a color. Harper's briefing materials identified as profound respect. The Krillian people will remember this, Ambassador Harper. My government made terrible mistakes. You had every right to destroy us. Instead, you've offered us a path to redemption. That is a debt we can never fully repay. We don't want debt, Harper replied. We want partners. We want a galaxy where conflicts are resolved before they become wars, where justice is prioritized over conquest, where different species work together because they recognize their common interests. That's worth fighting for, and that's worth building peace for. As Harper prepared to leave the council chamber, Chairwoman Elena approached him. Ambassador, the council wishes to make an announcement. Humanity's provisional membership in this body is now permanent. Furthermore, we're proposing a new galactic law. Any conflict involving member species must undergo mandatory mediation before military action, and we're establishing a new enforcement mechanism. Species that commit atrocities will face not just economic sanctions, but combined military intervention. The Harper Doctrine, Dren added, joining them. That's what we're calling it. The principle that justice matters more than convenience, that humanitarian concerns outweigh political calculations, and that the galaxy's moral center should be defended with force if necessary. Harper smiled tiredly. I just wanted justice for 47 scientists. You're turning it into a revolution in galactic politics. No, Elena corrected. You started the revolution when you declared war. We're just catching up to where you've led us. Months later, in a bar on the council station, Harper shared a drink with Thorak. The Krillian trials had concluded. 3 officers had been convicted and imprisoned. The Krillian military was undergoing its supervised reduction. Human construction crews were working on Krillian worlds, rebuilding hospitals and schools. The first exchange students had been selected. I have to ask, Thorak said, his translator rendering the words with careful formality. If we hadn't surrendered, if we'd fought to mutual destruction, would you have gone through with it? Harper looked into his glass. We hoped you'd surrender first, but yes, we would have fought until we couldn't fight anymore. We've done it before to ourselves. It's humanity's greatest strength and our deepest curse. We can endure almost anything if we believe the cause is worth it. That's terrifying. Yes, that's why we prefer peace. War costs too much, even when you win. Every name in that casualty report is someone who won't see their children grow up, won't finish their research, won't live to see the galaxy we're building. We won the war, Ambassador Thorak, but we didn't win anything we're proud of. We established a principle. We achieved justice. And now we're trying to make sure we never have to do this again. Thorak raised his glass. To peace, then, and to the hope that our children know each other as friends. Harper raised his glass in return. To peace, hard-won, dearly bought, and carefully maintained. They drank in silence, 2 former enemies sharing a moment of understanding that transcended species, politics, and the terrible necessities of war. In the observation gallery above them, young humans and Krillians studied together, preparing for the exchange programs that would define their generation. They laughed at shared jokes, struggled through each other's languages, and planned collaborative projects that would have been impossible just months before. The war was over. The hard work of building lasting peace was just beginning. And humanity, having proven they could fight when necessary, was now proving something far more important. They could forgive when possible and build bridges where others saw only battlefields. That was their true victory. Not the battles won or territory gained, but the choice to transform enemies into partners and revenge into redemption. The galaxy would never be quite the same. And that was exactly what 47 scientists who'd dedicated their lives to peaceful research would have wanted.